Welcome back.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so our next speaker is this is 11 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. What is it in regular people time? 3 o'clock a.m. in UTC. Our next talk is from Bryce Johnson, and the talk is titled "Friction That Fits: Unlocking a Universal Fund." Now, Bryce is a pretty cool cat from Canada, and he is a senior designer for Xbox, who through mucho grinding, I'm just reading the description
Mucho
here,
grinding.
unlocked the achievement of launching Xbox One. So he works for Microsoft Inclusive Design, and yeah, so I'm just going to let Bryce take over from here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, everybody. Yeah, we're going to talk about some crazy ideas that I have today, which is this notion of friction that fits. Let me just turn on my slides here. I got a lot of videos in this presentation, so I'm going to be trying to describe them for folks. Hopefully this works. I'm doing it at work to get the best possible bandwidth. Is my screen up? Yep, let's just assume it is.
It is.
Great. All right, so let's get started. Before I jump into this presentation, I want to give you a little bit of background about inclusive design at Microsoft, and it gives you a sense of where I'm coming from. So what I'm showing on the screen right now, there's a photo of a sign that we have on the Microsoft campus. It is the word inclusion in large letters. There is also a representation of that word in Braille dots, and then there are pictures of hands signing out each letter of the word inclusion. So across Microsoft, we are embracing inclusive design to fulfill our mission of empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And the way that we think about inclusive design is that it's complementary but separate from our accessibility practice. So we approach inclusive design from these three principles. Recognize exclusion. Exclusion happens when we solve problems using our own biases. As Microsoft designers, we seek out those exclusions and use them as opportunities to create new ideas and inclusive designs. I totally always want to read this one like in a Captain Kirk voice. As Microsoft designers, we seek out exclusions to explore new ideas and create inclusive designs to boldly go. It's really silly, but it's very funny in my head. The next sort of principle that we have here is learn from diversity, which is human beings are the real experts in adapting to diversity. Inclusive design puts people at the center from the very start of the process, and those fresh, diverse perspectives are the key to true insight. The last principle we have here is solve for one, extend to many. Everyone has abilities and limits to those abilities. Designing for people with permanent disabilities actually results in designs that benefit people universally. Constraints are a beautiful thing. So those are the principles that we follow that guide us through our inclusive design process. And at Xbox, we care about core gamers a lot. But as I just sort of said, we are intentionally examining our own biases so that we can focus on all kinds of gamers. So we have this idea, and this illustration sort of shows this notion of like what I would represent as our core at the center, and basically going out to a whole diverse sort of group of people. We believe that solving for people with unique needs leads to a mountain of happy customers across many spectrums of ability. It's the opposite of a funnel. So if we solve for people with unique needs, more people are going to benefit. And this visual that I'm showing now is basically a pyramid of people, all different, very diverse crowd. They're all in a icon. They're basically people icons, I should also say. So solve for one, extend to many. We are not trying to design for all of us. We aspire to design for each of us. And this is another sign that we have on campus. I'm showing a photo of it now. It's a sign that says designing products for 7.4 billion starts with designing for one. And that's a really sort of core idea that we have for digital products and inclusive design, is this notion that we respect what universal design is, but we think that we can be much more personal with our inclusive design practice, that we can come up with solutions that fit individual needs, and that when those solutions are accessible to available to everyone, people can create the experiences that they want to have. That's sort of what we're going for with our inclusive design process. So I got a picture here that my kid made. She made it in Minecraft. It's like a woman standing in front of a huge wall in the background that says barriers with like a little frowny emoticon face. And when we discuss making things accessible, us in our industry, we often talk about like removing barriers, and friction is a barrier. Friction slows things down and it makes us work harder. In UI design, friction is the opposite of effortless. It is the opposite of intuitive. And when we work on the Xbox One OS and Windows OS, we are actually really focused on removing friction. But friction can be good. So what I'm showing now is 4 photos by Phil Toldano. And they show basically people kind of making game faces. This set of photos is from a series that he had shot of people playing games. And you may have seen these photos before, and you probably came across them as I did through Jane McGonigal's TED Talk, Gaming Can Make a Better World. And as she says in her talk, if you're not a gamer, you might miss some of the nuance of these photos. You probably see a sense of urgency, a little bit of fear, but intense concentration and deep, deep focus on tackling a real difficult problem. These are the faces of people who, against all odds, are on the verge of an epic win. So, challenge is why we play games. Games are the combination of assonance and dissonance, of conflict and resolution. They are cycles of tension and release. Great games don't remove friction. They have the best possible friction in the right places. So I'm asking game designers that I talk to, and I'm trying to get this notion across. I want people to strive to make their games challenging and universal. And I want them to do that by making their barriers ergonomic. I want their barriers to adapt. I want them to create friction that fits. So right here, we got some screenshots. I'm going to show some sort of rotating screenshots from Microsoft Combat Flight Simulator 3 Battle for Europe. And I'm doing this because many of us here at Microsoft are enamored with the ideas of Todd Rose from his book, The End of Average. And I'm going to read to you one of the stories from the book. In the 1940s, the US Air Force had a major problem. Its pilots could not keep control of their planes. At its worst point, 17 pilots crashed in a single day, and the military blamed the men, citing pilot error as the most common reason in the crash reports, which seemed reasonable since the planes themselves seldom malfunctioned. The pilots didn't understand it either. The only thing that they knew was that it wasn't their piloting skills, and that wasn't causing the problem. If it wasn't human or mechanical error, what was it? When the first cockpit was designed, the engineers had measured the physical dimensions of hundreds of male pilots. And then they used this data to standardize the dimensions of the cockpit. They used it for the size and the shape of the seat, the distance to the pedals and the stick, the height of the windshield, and even the shape of the flight helmets were built to conform to the average dimensions of a pilot. The military hired a scientist to measure 4,000 pilots. He calculated the average of the physical dimensions believed to be the most relevant for design, including height, chest, sleeve length, and these form the dimensions of the average pilot. And then the scientists compared each individual pilot to the average pilot. The consensus among most of the Air Force researchers was that the vast majority of pilots would fall within this average range on most dimensions, and that they were stunned when they tabulated how many fit within the average range. 0. Out of 4,000 pilots, no airmen fit within the average range. There is no such thing as an average pilot. If you've designed a cockpit to fit the average pilot, you've designed it to fit no one. So this next visual is a fun one. It's a little color plate from that shows uniforms from the Civil War. And this practice for designing for averages started in the Civil War. Because before this, war uniforms were custom sewn. But the number of people that needed to be outfitted for the Civil War required mass production. So, so averages were used to create subtypes: small, medium, and large. Classifications that found their way into civilian clothing. Classifications that we still use today. To me, these kind of classifications remind me of what we often see in games, which is easy, normal, and hard. This notion of buckets of skill. And I think that we need to strive for a better fit than big sort of buckets of skill. And I think that we can do that. If we enable our games and experiences to be tailored to each individual to fit, I believe that that's an opportunity for game developers to create truly personalized experiences for the gamers. And I also believe that we're going to reach more people with what we create. So what I'm going to show here is, this is a video. It's the settings UI in Forza Horizon 3. And I really appreciate how the difficulty settings are tackled. Because while you have big buckets of difficulty, like easy, normal, hard, you also have the ability to fine-tune elements, giving you control over how you play the game. So on this next one, I'm going to actually go through and change some of the settings in this video. And easy by default has an experience bonus of 10%. But if I turn on braking for assistance, or if I turn on assistance for braking and steering and traction and stability, and I can compete, if I compete against more experienced drivers, and if I do a couple tweaks like turning off rewind, I can get my experience bonus up to 25%. So I have the assistance I need, and I'm still competing hard. So I want to ask game developers, like, how can you extend the variables of your game's difficulty to be more flexible? That's sort of one of the things that we always want to ask people. So this next video is a montage of brightness settings from various games like Halo 5 and Quantum Break, things like that. And I show this because most games have gamma settings. And what I always tell game developers is brightness is an accessibility setting. And they don't get it, but it totally is. Being able to see the game is accessibility. So I want to ask them, how do you extend the idea of what a brightness setting does? Like, could I have settings that allow my certain elements of my game to be brighter than others? Because this may enable people to see things better. Like, could it have someone be able to maintain focus more easily if they could darken the elements that distract them, just so they could focus on the ones that they want to see? And I also like to tell people that, you know what goes great with brightness? Contrast. Contrast and brightness are peanut butter and jelly. And people with low vision often ask us for higher contrast interfaces, that they're easier for them to use. We have high contrast on the shell. We do it in Windows, we do it on Xbox OS, and we're trying to figure out how we can get games to embrace high contrast. Yeah. So this next shot here is sort of menus and settings from a game called Killer Instinct. I know a gamer named Sightless Combat. He's from the UK. I'm positive many of you know him as well. And Sightless is a gamer who is completely blind. And he plays Killer Instinct, and he totally slays at it. He worked with Zachary Quarles, who's a sound designer here at Xbox, on enhancing the sound settings of Killer Instinct in a way that he could tune the game so that he could be more competitive. So I'm going to go through the sound settings that he set in this next sort of video. So what Sightless does is he turns the music all the way off. So he doesn't allow for any music in the game. And then there's a setting that he asked for that we added in, which is HUD meter. volume. And I must admit, like, it took me a really long time to even hear what this HUD meters does. It's a sonic representation of two aspects of the HUD, the shadow and the KV meters. And so when those things hit maximum, they didn't have a sound before, but you need to know what those are to, compete. Sightless also turns his announcer volume up a little bit because he likes it. It's been great working with Sightless, and he's really sort of shown us a lot of how we could think about sound to make our games more accessible. It gives us a lot to think about, and we hope to work with him a long time. So next thing I'm going to go through is I'm going to go through Gears of War controller settings, and we're going to go through the little settings menu. This little video that goes through that. So one of the things that the fine folks at Able Gamers tell me that they really appreciate about this new settings is there's a way to toggle your primary weapon with just a single button. You don't have to go through a menu to or options of it. And so that's easy for you to switch between two weapons. And the other thing that they lobbied for was they lobbied for a controller scheme that you're shown here, which is face trigger, which puts the shoot button on the ABX, it puts it on X, which is on the face of the controller and away from the trigger. And I can tell you that when we talk with game designers and we have this controller that this controller that I can quite confidently say is the greatest controller on the market, but we've designed it around a primary use case. We've designed it to be used a single way, and we've optimized it over many iterations around a single way. So we're now trying to figure out ways of how we can make sure that gamers can play when they can't use the controller the way that we assume that people use it. So face trigger is something that the coalition, who are the designers of Gears of War, did, and it makes a big difference. If you don't have the strength to hold a controller, you can't reach around to hit the trigger. So being able to put the shoot button on the face is a huge win for that. So I'm gonna next up, Forza Motorsport 6. Forza, this has 14 controller layout options, and it covers a vast array of how you can play the game. And Turn 10 and the Coalition, they added these great controller customizations to their game to help more people to play. But we need to do more. We need to help people. We need to help people play more. So we recently just launched a feature, which we've been getting a lot of good feedback on. It's called Copilot. And Copilot is a feature where you can set two controllers to act as one, which means that two people could essentially play one game. And we designed this as an assistive technology to meet a very specific need. And we were inspired to design this feature. Honestly, we looked at a lot of photos from Special Effect, which is a gaming charity in the UK. And we see a lot of their custom rigs, and a lot of their custom rigs involve two controllers that they'd wired together to act as one. And so it seemed like a fairly kind of no-brainer thing for us to say, well, why don't we just do that at the software level? And so we did. And what we found even before we launched it was we saw situational benefits. So how earlier I was talking about if you design for a really specific need, you can kind of get benefits from things that you weren't necessarily anticipating. So, now we see parents out there who set up Copilot for their really young children, and then they tell their kids, okay, this is fire, this is jump, just do that. And the kids can play the game, and the parents can kind of sit back and kind of help them steer or help them navigate. You can think about it as those student driver cars, with the second steering wheel. So it gives and we've seen a lot of really cool things where parents have gone out there and used Copilot to help children just sort of get into games. And it's been really amazing. The feedback that we've got has been tremendous. And we need people in the gaming community to tell us what they think about features like Copilot and the controllers options that we offer. We offer remapping. We ask for feedback all the time. We really need to keep getting that feedback because it's really important for us to hear from the community about what people want in terms of their controllers. And I'll tell you, Copilot is just the start. Copilot was the thing that we could get kind of going quickly. And like I said, it's been very well received. So now I'm going to go into a couple ways that I'm asking game developers and other designers that I work with to approach problems. And I'm going to go into two things, which is I want people to address limitations, and I want people to think about how they're extending continuums. So the first one is addressing limitations. And I've come up with this because I don't like to talk about conditions. I am not a medical professional. I'm a designer. And while, I'm someone who is very eager and tries to be as knowledgeable as they can about how people use things, I find that when we get into conversations about conditions, it's really not helpful. And that being said, though, I know that people need details to design against. So instead of talking about conditions, I try to talk with people about limitations, and I'm trying to develop a concise and complete set of criteria that gives us some things to look for. So today I'm going to go through mobility and dexterity, hearing, and vision. I'm not going to talk about cognitive, neural, and nonverbal. I'm just not ready to. They're not in good enough shape. So when we talk about mobility and dexterity, we mostly talk about this in terms of input. And we talk with hardware about this. We talk with software about this, about how people design their UIs. We talk with game developers about this. And the way that I've kind of decided to break it down, and I feel pretty good about this, but I think like it's something that I still need to work on. The criteria are minimum strength. I don't have the strength to hold a controller, the way that you've designed it. Reduced endurance, and that could be either through strength or pain. So if I have arthritis or if I have a condition like a repetitive stress disorder, we've talked to people that they've said, I only get to play 2 hours a night because of my repetitive stress disorder. But man, those 2 hours are the most important part of my day. So how do I, we're Xbox, we want people to play more. What can I do to go out there to get someone to help them play more? We talk about stiffness, like you would see with cerebral palsy. We talk about things like involuntary movement or tics. We think about shaky movement or tremors. We think about posture and balance because we're starting to think about mixed reality scenarios, and posture and balance is extremely important. We think about coordination. A lot of times, this is a big one, this notion of slowed down movements or reaction time. Can we tell game developers, I know that you think your game on easy is really easy, but if you gave people more time, more people could play. So, maybe slow it down a bit more. And in hardware, we always tend to talk about things like amputations and malformations. As I said before, our controller's really ergonomically optimized for people with 2 thumbs. So I'm going to get into hearing. When we think about hearing, we think about the degrees of hearing loss, the ones that are sort of out there in the world. We have to think about bilateral versus unilateral hearing loss, symmetrical versus asymmetrical hearing loss, fluctuating versus stable loss, tinnitus or ringing in the ears. That one's for Bill. Dizziness and balance. Again, back to mobility. There's obviously, when you have things like vestibular disorders, dizziness and balance is actually somewhat related to hearing. And I have small d deaf here because when we're talking about designing for solutions, obviously we need to talk about if someone can't hear at all. So, vision. So this is how I've broken down vision. I talk with people about things like reduced contrast perception. As people get older, they can't see contrast. And so it's important to ensure that people have the ability to adjust not only brightness, but things like contrast. I talk about decreased light sensitivity and decreased visual acuity. We talk about things like clouding, cataracts, how that can affect viewing, floaters. We talk about tunnel vision and blind spots and how we can think about designing for those. And we talk about blindness. You know, gaming, you know, up until recently, gaming was called video games. Video implied that you could see it. And I think that there's lots of amazing games that we've seen over the past few years that show us that you don't have to see it. And there's lots of amazing games that and opportunities that we have to explore those things. So I'm going to show a video now. And this video is 3 first-person shooter games. And I'm going to try to describe it as we go. But I want to sort of, I show these 3 games. They're all great games. They're, but they've made unique stylistic choices. And some of them can be better for people with low vision than others. Let's see if here we go. So we got a title here, First Person Shooters with Low Vision. The games are Battlefield 1, Overwatch, and Super Hot. Little montage here of all 3 games playing. So Battlefield 1, the challenge with Battlefield 1 is the realistic visuals that are valued by players of this game, but the gray on gray figures don't provide enough contrast for people with low vision to play on an equal playing field with others. So you can kind of see there, it's kind of a little bit hard to see who you're shooting against. This next game is Overwatch. Overwatch. So bright colors, target outlines, and they have a lot of really fantastic game enhancing sound treatments that really help make this game more accessible than a lot of first person shooters. You know, it's also insanely fun. So yeah, we're playing a little Overwatch there, getting a little rain put on us. So this next game is a title that a lot of people might not have heard of. It's called Super Hot. And it's got some really interesting mechanics. So in Super Hot, the enhanced color contrast scheme of this game, along with the game mechanic that enemies only move when you do, actually make this a really good game for people with low vision. So you can see here, there's like, well, there's some bright red figures against a muted background. And they only charge at you when you yourself move. So if you need to for the action to stop, you just stop moving and everything stops. So it's actually a really cool game. It's very exciting. So I'm going to say, let's watch them all at the same time. And I want you to see if there's anyone that's easier to see than the others. And as we keep kind of, this montage keeps going, I'm going to start adding I'm going to start layering over effects that sort of give you an idea of how these could work if you have a vision limitation. It's a little choppy. Sorry for that. So this one's blurry vision. So I'm going to just sort of blur it out a little bit. You know, this is how I see if I'm not wearing my glasses. You can see that like Battlefield's harder. The gray blobs tend to merge into the gray background. So this one is blurry vision and reduced contrast. So same clip, but I've reduced the contrast and I still made it blurry. So Battlefield, you know, it's just getting worse. I don't really can see anything. Overwatch is still doing okay. And Super Hot still, you know, still pretty good. Like I can see a red blob, and that red blob, you know, it's probably the easiest thing of these 3 to see. So now I'm going to basically put a film over it that's intending to simulate cataracts. So, you know, Battlefield's pretty hard to play at this point. Overwatch is still pretty hard. Super Hot is hard, but it's still, I believe, playable. And you know, the one thing I want to say about all these simulations that I kind of do and what I sort of show with them, we have signs all over the place when we talk to people, when we do simulations. Simulations we use for ideation. We don't want to use simulations for validation. And we say that over and over again, because I really don't ever want to encourage my fellow designers and the developers that I work with to get into a headspace where they think that they can use a simulator to role play what it's like to have a disability. I shut that down. And it's something that we all really, in the accessibility community here at Microsoft, are really very passionate about. So we do use simulators, but we're very careful to tell people that we use them to generate ideas, and we don't recommend that we use simulators to validate decisions. You know, that's why we need to engage with the community. We need to show people what we're doing and get the feedback from people who actually, you know, would use it, as opposed to depending on a simulator. Again, with all these 3 games, you know, one of the things I kind of want to say is that these are all stylistic choices. So when I have a game developer that says, well, the style of my game can't be this high contrast, you know, we talk about it. But at the same time, you know, at the end of the day, they have to make that choice. And I tell them it's the same kind of choice that they have to make, like when they think about the rating of their game. Like, yeah, if you're going to like have a chainsaw that like cuts people in half and blood sprays everywhere and you get an M rating, that's an artistic choice that you've made. And I think that while we encourage people to, you know, do what's right by our customers, there is definitely still an element of art when it comes to game design. And that's something that we're still working through about how we can kind of find that balance. So I'm going to go into this next one, which is extending continuums. And so what I've got here, I've got a bunch of parameters that, you know, could be very well established within a game. Like I have things like overt and subtle, if I think about how elements are, fast and slow, weak and strong, less enemies, more enemies, less ammo, lots of ammo. Maybe you just need a few buttons to press to play the game, or maybe you need, you know, all the buttons that the controller has to offer to do something. And so when a game designer defines these parameters, they think about where it starts and like where it's like the easiest and where it's hardest. So I just want to ask them, to embrace the opportunity where someone might not be able to play the game that you've designed on the spectrum that you've defined. And I want to ask them to push the variables beyond what they think is reasonable. And I want them to do that through examining their own biases. So we do this because we really want to allow more people to play your game, whether they have a permanent impairment or a situational limitation. One of the last year, Naughty Dog spoke about what they did with Uncharted 4 on ID24 last year, and then this spring at GDC, they talked about one feature that they designed, which is auto left camera. And they said that 1/3 of their players turn that on, which is amazing. That's like so incredible that like they created an accessibility feature and 1/3 of their players are using it. That's like the greatest success story ever. And you know, so when we tell people to like think about like extending these parameters, we have to like tell them we're not suggesting that they're dumbing down their games. But we want to tell them you need to do this so that more people can experience the great story that you've created. You know, no one makes a game to have it not be played, you know? So we're just trying to like get people through examining their own biases to see how they can, and extending these continuums that they can include more people in what they do. So I'm going to talk a bit now. I'm going to kind of close up here on some future notions, some sort of musings that I have. I'm going to play another video. This is a video of the training sort of part of Halo Wars 2. You know, it tells you how to what you need to press, what buttons you need to press, and how to play the game. It sends you through a couple sort of quick missions, things like that. So when I think about how new technologies can be applied to gaming, I see great possibilities for making games that are more tailored to the player. And one of them is machine learning. And I'd like to imagine a time when you fire up a new game and you play the tutorial, that this onboarding process serves multiple purposes. Tutorials that teach you how to play, but what if while you're playing those tutorials, it evaluates your abilities across multiple parameters and then adjusts the difficulty accordingly? So I'm asking for tutorials and tuning in one. And there's an expression in gaming called "get good," which is it's about grinding. It's about like you play the game until you're good at it. And what I'm trying to promote is this notion of what if I only had to get good if I chose to play that way. And we often talk about, the video kind of ended. It was a little short. I kind of went a little over. I'm going to just rewind that. My little backdrop. So we often talk about being able to skip parts of the game that are too difficult. But what if we didn't have parts of the game that were too difficult? Could we design games that you could play with 20 buttons and the twitchy fingers of a teenager that could also be played with one button and all the time in the world? And what I'm describing might sound like dynamic or adaptive difficulty, or sometimes they call it dynamic game balancing. But I think it's a kind of modern reimagining of those ideas, enhanced by machine learning. And, it might be a crazy idea, but it's something that I'm really excited about. And I think that, it's probably a ways off, but I really feel like we're going to get there. And to kind of back that up, Mary Meeker's 2017 report came out a few days ago. It's a wonderful time of the year from Kleiner Perkins, their Internet Trends report. And there's a slide in there that talks about dynamic difficulty adjustment as the ultimate trial and error experience. And they show this chart from the Games for Learning Institute. And there's two axes in this chart. There's challenge and then there's ability. And if you get too far into the challenge space, you get into anxiety. And if you get too far on the ability space, you get into boredom. So there is a balance between, that creates flow between challenge and ability, and being able to keep people in that flow zone will keep them playing longer, which is what we strive for in our industry. So I'm going to close up with a couple things here. And I think to most of you, I wrote these for a game developer audience. So I think to most of you, I think you're going to get it a lot quicker. But the ideas are, no one is average. We need to stop thinking that there is a group of average users. That doesn't exist. I want people to think about how they can make the barriers in their games ergonomic. How can they be adjusted so that they're still there, they're still challenging, and that challenge is what drives us. But how can they be adjusted so that they can be conquered? And this fit that those ergonomic barriers create is an opportunity for all of us. It's an opportunity to have our games reach a wider audience. It's an opportunity to have our content be played more often and for longer. And those are all sort of things that we're striving for. And that's my talk, everybody.
Awesome. Bryce, I gotta say, I'm not a huge gamer myself. I'm just terrible at them.
Yeah.
But I really like everything that you've said in terms of considerations during the design process and thinking about how gamers with different abilities will be able to work on it. It's all stuff that I haven't really given a lot of thought about myself because, like I said, I'm not a gamer. So I appreciate these. Every time you've given gaming accessibility talks, I really appreciate it because it gives me things to think about that I've never thought about before.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I am a gamer. I'm still waiting for Bryce to give me a free Xbox. Hasn't happened yet.
I know.
Well, what a bum.
I know, right?
I know.
Even though I keep telling him how good his talks are every year and everything else, but I mean, honestly, kidding aside, I do use a lot of the features, and I use more of them probably every year. I seem to celebrate my birthday by updating making video games easier, or turning on subtitles, or playing with the audio controls. I mean, I do all of this, and the Uncharted last year was fantastic when they rolled out all those new special features, and I used a lot of them. There was a couple of things that I used to make aiming easier, just
Yeah.
because I don't have that dexterity anymore. Maybe it's
Well,
because the only time I can play is late at night, and I'm just too damn tired.
every year the average age of the gamer goes up. There's more gamers over 50 than there are under 18.
Geez, all right. Well, I'm
Really?
still.
Wow.
That's.
I think it's 50. It's at least 40. I'm pulling that out of data.
Well, I'm solidly
I'm
in one of those
confident with it.
demographics. So there were a couple of questions from Twitter, Bryce.
Cool.
Um,
Am I showing up right? Did I shut my screen off?
yeah.
Okay.
Let me. You're there. I will stop presenting you. That way they can see my lovely face when I speak.
Okay.
God, yeah. People reaching for their monitors, turn them off. Okay. The first question is, said in your ID24 talk, you say you'd rather have people engage in the community rather than use simulations. Any advice on how?
Yeah, like get ready to do a lot of work. I mean, I don't, I think people use simulators because they don't have access to the community. I work for Microsoft. I can't say I don't have resources, so like, we do a lot of we try to do a lot of outreach, and it's hard. I certainly I wish I had like a really simple answer, like like go down to your local, I always hear things like go down to your local school and test your features, and I mean that might work for some people. For us, we try to bring as many people in. A huge part of what we do is sort of cultivating a group of experts that we can go talk to. For a while, I was texting Sightless more than I was my wife. So, that's just something that like we do. So it's, and good on him. He was up for it.
Good stuff.
And
Okay.
Bryce, I have a question, if that's all right. I know that sometimes with some of the features that companies like yourselves at Microsoft have introduced that have been an amazing benefit to gamers with disabilities have kicked off a degree of kind of controversy in the gaming world because of a perceived advantage that this almost offers.
Yep.
What's your kind of thoughts around that? It's an interesting area, I think.
Oh yeah. Well, lots of I don't want to say that cheating doesn't exist. Cheating exists. We know that cheating exists. We have data that cheating exists. What I do want to do is I want to have a conversation over what cheating is. And I want to talk with people about how we sort of tackle the problem. I think that in any industry, there's a lot of sort of folklore, if you will, that like beliefs, like deep-seated beliefs. And I'm trying to think when people bring up cheating, I go, well, yeah, there is that, but there's also including more people. And where do we find the balance? And I think for a platform company like us, we don't want to exclude anyone, but at the same time, we respect our game developers, and so we give them options. So I wish I could say like kind of one way or another. I think it's an ongoing discussion, but it is definitely a discussion we're having. We have it a lot, and I will tell everybody in the world that there are lots of people that are worried about cheating. I'm on the other side. I'm worried about. I'm there to challenge that notion.
Right, and I think you're absolutely right. It very much depends on the definition of cheating. I know back when I could see, and this will give away my age, Tekken 3 was the huge game of the time. And I had a friend who used to take the the PlayStation console, game pad, and they used to mash the D-pad with the back of a teaspoon.
Yeah.
Because they could just roll it around really, really quickly.
Nice.
And just by absolute accident, they would just hit these awesome kind of move combinations and stuff. And in our living room, sitting around the couch drinking beer. Yeah, it was kind of cheating, but it was kind of funny. But you obviously move that to, say, a competitive environment, and different rules, different context, different definition.
Yeah, and competitive gaming is a big business. Like, I certainly don't want to. I mean, cheating is a serious issue, especially like
Sure.
there's the League of Legends finals this year had more viewers than the NBA finals this year. So competitive gaming is a serious, like, esports is a serious business. So but it's that notion that everyone's like, well, not everyone is into esports. I mean, I think one of the things that we're trying to do here at Xbox, we're trying to help people through features like that. We have like clubs and looking for group. We're trying to find people who are, so that we're trying to give tools to people that they can connect with gamers that are like them. And, so that they can find the people that they want to play with. We want to enable people to find their tribe. And that's, the best thing that we can do as a platform company.
Right. And at the end of the day, there's going to be more people out there in the world sitting on their couches playing games with their friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And pretty much any other group, I should imagine.
Or playing with like your friends from around the world.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Definitely.
Cool.
Billy, sorry, I think you had more questions, yeah?
There was one more, yeah. Somebody was wondering if you could share the links to all the things you discussed.
Yes, I can. I have them somewhere, but I will. Yeah, and I actually have a version of this deck up, an older version. I added a bunch of stuff for this talk today, mostly around like those lists of limitations and things like that we look at in that video that I showed with the first person shooters, or was added for today. But yeah, I can share the links. But yeah, for all the stuffs, I will do my best.
Yeah, it's a big ask. I understand.
Cool.
Good stuff. Yeah. Okay. So
Awesome.
we're coming up on our time now. Leonie's probably wants to ask you one final question, because she likes to do that just to really throw you
Awesome.
up.
I do. Yeah. If you could recommend one thing that the people listening and watching could go out and change tomorrow in the way they do things that would make their stuff more inclusive, what would it be?
Well, I think from if you want something really pragmatic, I would say give people more time in your games. That would be the big one for me. But if I could be a little bit more ethereal, I would ask people to really think about really examining their own biases and their own ideas. Because I mean, I think it's pretty easy to look at accessibility and general purpose computing and to see that, like, in the internet started from a place that was accessible. Games started with like dudes making stuff for other dudes that they were like them. Like, we have a heritage that, we have a great heritage of making amazing content, but it's often we make stuff for each other. And I think that it's important for us to think about who we're not making games for. And Satoru Iwata had a great quote in 2005, and I'm going to butcher it because I can't remember it off the top of his head, but he basically at GDC said, he urged developers to make a game that they themselves might not play. And that's something, that really inspires me. That quote, still to this day, it's like 10 years old, or it's more than 10 years old. I think it was from GDC 2005. So it's one of those things that I have a poster of it on my wall. I'm just going to keep it up there.
Excellent. That's great advice. Thanks, Bryce. A really awesome talk. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to take a quick 10-minute break, and we will meet you back in 10 minutes. Thanks, everybody.
See you later.
See you then.